Well, it's time to get started. Number 4, 11 in the heaven. Lead on, O King eternal. Let us sing. Lead on, O King eternal. The day of March has come. Yet for the fields of conquest, thy tent shall be our home. Through days of preparation, thy grace has made us strong. And now, O King eternal, we lift our battle song. Lead on, O King eternal, we follow not with fears. For gladness breaks like morning, where thy face appears. Thy cross is lifted for us, we journey in its light. The crown awaits the conquest. Lead on, O God of might. Let us pray. Dear Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Father, again, we come to thy throne of grace and mercy, meeting here in fellowship, in love, and learning of your word. Father, we ask that you continue to guide us in the things that we do will be pleasing and acceptable in your sight. As we travel on, we ask that you continue to strengthen us that we may bring others to know Christ as we do. And Father, we always ask, please forgive us any sins we committed since we last bowed. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay, if you all don't mind, I'm just going to do the announcements from back here. Hello, hi. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Continue. Ladies' Bible class is Tuesday, 10 o'clock. That's going pretty good. What are you about? Acts chapter 6, 7, somewhere around there? 7? Okay. Any prayer list updates, please give them to Viva. Wednesday night series is what we're doing tonight. Tonight is our last part of the Bible Unearthed. We're going to watch 11 and 12, and then next week we start a brand new series that goes for 12 weeks. And again, thanks to Cheryl for putting together the holiday party. I added the please pass the apple salsa on the bottom there.
Like our new sponsor?
Yeah. They're going to build a new wing for us. So, all right. I got another thing, just to re-announce, an email did go out. The mobile and desktop website has gone live. Has everybody had a chance to look at it?
Yeah, nice.
Okay, then here, we'll take a quick look. Why you want to pass out those other documents, Deborah, while I'm doing that? I actually like the way the mobile one looks better on the smartphone than the actual big one does. Anyways, there it kind of is. And it's grouped in sections. We've got a greeting. We can go to our services. We have teaching. Here, you can click on this and go directly to our YouTube page. And why it's this computer is weird here. It's all right. Go to our YouTube page under teaching, and then we have an about us. Talks about a little, what kind of people we are. That was hard to write. Anyways, what we believe, our giving, and then you can contact us, and that's a couple things they can do throughout the web page. They can click on our email and send us a direct email. They can click on, if you're on a smartphone and you click on the telephone thing, it'll dial directly to us. And then there's a form that they can fill out and submit to us as well with information. So that's it, folks.
Very nice.
Deborah just passed out a sample brochure that I've been working on. It hasn't really been approved yet, but that's our idea. The idea is to take, again, it's a static document, kind of like the website. The website is not going to be dynamic, something that we're changing and putting announcements up on it every week. We just don't have the manpower and time to do that kind of stuff. And the brochure here is, again, a static document that once we print it up, it's got a longevity to it. So we can print that up, and you want to pass that out to people in the community and do that. That's kind of the general idea of that document. It gives a little summary of who we are, kind of like the website. Okay? Any questions on that? All right. Joe already did our opening prayer.
He did.
He did. Multi.
Welcome back to Bible Unearthed. In this session, we're going to talk about accidental discoveries. Tito, sorry about that.
Thanks, Dave. Well, one accidental discovery that we have mentioned before is the Rosetta Stone. Back when Napoleon was in Egypt, his soldiers were working on a fort, and they accidentally came upon this stone with the 3 different scripts, which ended up being one of the great discoveries in archaeology. Again, just discovered by some guys building by accident.
Wow. If the French discovered it, how did it end up in the British Museum?
War. The British took over Egypt and they confiscated it and brought it to the British Museum.
Because I hear it's like the #1 artifact to see at the British Museum.
It is.
Give
For
Lord a
over
chance.
200 years. The Dead Sea Scrolls, which we've also talked about, were another incredible discovery, and yet by accident, not by professional archaeologists. Here's a slide of Qumran Cave 4, and here are the brothers that supposedly discovered the initial scrolls. The story goes that they were out shepherding, and they had been chasing after one of their goats, and they threw a rock into this cave and heard this shatter of pottery. Here's some of the pottery from inside one of the caves. And so they went in to investigate, and they saw that inside these pots, there were these scrolls or pieces of leather, animal skin. They actually didn't think that they were that valuable, but they brought them back to their camp, and eventually they were shown to some experts in antiquities, ended up getting sold in pieces, and it took years until they were finally all collected and brought back to Jerusalem, where they're on display now. There are actually, though, still a few fragments floating around in private collections.
Wow. All by discovery, by accident. Wow.
Shepherd Boy, accidental discovery,
Wow.
one of the biggest archaeological finds ever.
Wow.
And a nice mustache.
For your next story, we're going to go over there.
The famous terracotta army in China is another thing that wasn't discovered by a professional archaeologist in a dig. It was in rural China that a farmer was digging a well when he accidentally came upon some of these statues. The rest is history.
Wow. We've seen shots of that. It's just so incredible. That was all underground?
All underground in a tomb of the emperor.
So what do you do when you're accidentally find something like this, does it make you instantly like world famous and rich? And
Apparently
the guy just
not for
steal it from
the
you.
people. If you look at many of these accidental discoveries, the ones who made the discoveries typically are unknown. I think the shepherd boys who found the Dead Sea Scrolls are among the more famous, but the others, like who found the Venus de Milo and the Xi'an terracotta army and the Lascaux cave paintings and so on, most people have no idea who actually found those.
Wow. So there's hope for us, Dave.
Yes, there is.
Another probably accidental discovery that's hugely important and yet little known was this stone that was found in Nazareth. We call it the Nazareth inscription, and it relates to the resurrection of Jesus. We just talked about the tomb of Jesus, but there are several historians from the ancient world who have reports about the resurrection of Jesus. And then this stone inscription, it's a reaction from the Roman government, probably Emperor Claudius, to the rumors of the resurrection and sort of the Roman soldier spread version of the story. So in this edict, it prohibits, with the penalty being death, anyone to steal a body from a stone-sealed sepulcher tomb with wicked intent. It's like trying to stop anything like that happening again.
That shows just how far and wide the gospel message of the resurrection had reached, right? It got to all the way to the upper echelons of Roman
Exactly.
governments.
Even
such
just
that they had
several
to issue
years
this. Yeah.
after the resurrection of Jesus, the emperor is already getting involved in this. Well, the truth of the resurrection is what gave the apostles the confidence to then go out into the entire Roman world and beyond and take that gospel message. And we have a huge amount of evidence from these sites mentioned in Acts and the epistles. Corinth and Greece is one of the most important.
Well, Dave was at Corinth, and there's a bunch of evidence for the New Testament apostles. So let's go there.
This was the Corinth that Paul visited when he came here in 50 AD. It was the capital of Achaia province and the seat of Roman power in the region, being controlled by a proconsul. Corinth was probably the fifth largest city in the Roman Empire, behind Rome, Alexandria, Ephesus, Antioch. And since it was a hub of travel and commerce with a population of over 200,000 people, it was yet another location for the gospel to have far-reaching impact. Let's return to the book of Acts. Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had ordered all Jews to leave Rome. Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker as they were, he stayed and worked with them. Every Sabbath, he reasoned in the synagogue, trying to persuade Jews and Greeks. Acts 18, 1-4. Luke tells us that after Paul arrived in Corinth, he soon met Priscilla and Aquila, fellow tent makers who had been deported from Rome by Emperor Claudius. According to first century records, Claudius tried to rid Rome of Judeans and Christians in about 49 AD. Now, Paul and his new friends may have sold their tents right here in this location in what would have been shops at the western side of the Forum. Paul also followed his normal custom of going to the synagogue to preach the gospel. There was at least one synagogue of the Jews here in Corinth. This is demonstrated by a Greek inscription reading Synagogue of the Hebrews, which was discovered here, that's now housed at the Museum of Ancient Corinth. This limestone block appears to be the lintel of a doorway, and the Greek letters that can still be seen are Alpha, Gamma, Omega, Gamma, Eta, Epsilon, Beta, Rho. In Greek, Synagoge Ebreion can be translated Synagogue of the Hebrews.
Another significant location in the book of Acts is the city of Athens, where Paul was just before he went to Corinth. Now, he starts off going through the city, and it says that he notices all these idols and temples. And indeed, if you go to Athens today, you can see the ruins of temples and altars and idols everywhere. Then he gets to the agora, or the marketplace, and he goes to a synagogue there, Well, all this stuff has been discovered. You go to Athens, you can see it today. They've uncovered it through archaeology. Then Paul, after starting to preach the gospel to people, he gains the interest of the philosophers, and they sort of put him on trial in a way and take him to the Areopagus or Mars Hill. If we go to Acts 17, starting in 22, it says, "But Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, 'Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. Now what you worship is something unknown. I'm going to proclaim to you.'" So he uses this altar that they're familiar with to launch into an explanation of Jesus Christ and the gospel. But he referenced as a real thing, because altars to the unknown God inscribed in Greek have been discovered from the Roman period. He wasn't just making something up. And this place he's in, the Areopagus, we know exactly where that is.
It's incredible to me that you can read the scripture, and there he is at the Agora, the marketplace in the morning, and he goes to Mars Hill to do his discussions in the afternoon, and there's these altars, this archaeological evidence to the unknown God, and it's like just the story just comes alive.
It does. And we have so much evidence from many different categories of archaeology, including tiny little things like coins.
Yeah, we've talked about coins and how you can date layers of your excavations with coins. But by the New Testament period, right, the 1st century AD, coins really became a tool that you could use to provide evidence for these New Testament characters. So let's go to a video right now that's just going to give us a little more explanation of the coins of the 1st century.
Political officials minted coins with a variety of designs and inscriptions, usually referring to themselves or to the Roman emperor of the time. Caesar Augustus is mentioned in Luke chapter 2, verse 1. Emperor Augustus minted many coins in many different designs. This coin shows a profile of him with the phrase "Divine Augustus." Tiberius Caesar is mentioned in Luke chapter 3, verse 1, and also appears on quite a few coins. This silver denarius, commonly called the tribute penny, depicts Tiberius in profile, with the surrounding inscription, "Caesar Augustus Tiberius, son of the divine Augustus." Because Tiberius was the Roman emperor at the time of Jesus, this is the coin many believe Jesus was holding when the Pharisees tried to trap him into saying something incriminating about Rome's tax system. His famous response was this: "You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax." They brought him a denarius, and he asked them, "Whose image is this, and whose inscription?" "Caesar's," they replied. Then he said to them, "So give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." Herod the Great, who is first mentioned in Matthew chapter 2, verse 1, also issued his own coins. This bronze pruta shows a ceremonial bowl sitting on a tripod. It also has a Greek inscription that reads, "Of King Herod." Herod also displayed other objects such as this helmet, palm branches, and star. Herod Antipas, tetrarch of the Galilee region, is mentioned throughout the ministry of Jesus. This is the Herod mentioned during the trial of Jesus. The front of this coin shows a palm branch surrounded by the Greek words Herod Tetrarch. Another prominent character in the gospel story is Pontius Pilate, who is first mentioned in Luke chapter 3, verse 1. Pilate minted coins that honored the Roman emperor Tiberius. This coin shows the Greek words Tiberius Caesar surrounding a curved wand important in Roman mythology. For anyone who loves history, ancient coins provide awesome evidence for the famous rulers we read about. Here in Israel, numerous coins have been discovered that establish the characters in the Gospels as real people in history.
Well, coins were first invented, as far as we know, way back in the 7th century BC. The first coin came from Lydia, which is in present-day Turkey.
That's the first coin ever made?
It is. It's called the Lydian stater, and they made them out of electrum, which is a combination of gold and silver, because in the river there, they were able to pull out those minerals, both gold and silver mixed together. They started the minting of coins. It caught on. The Greeks, the Romans, we get to the time of the apostles, and there are just coins all over the place. All the emperors, many of the other local kings, officials minting coins. And these help us immensely, not only in dating archaeological layers, but also identifying key people in historical texts like the New Testament, like Acts and the epistles. For example, here we have a coin of Herod Agrippa I, who of course is mentioned in the book of Acts. And then we have a coin of Nero. Nero was the emperor during the time of Paul when he was arrested and brought to trial, then released and arrested again and eventually executed. This is a coin of the Romans, which commemorated the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, which of course Jesus predicted. And many of the Christians had fled Jerusalem before this time, and then they went back.
Wow.
Here we have a coin of Domitian showing an altar. And Domitian was especially crazy in that he actually started to force people to address him as Lord and God. And it seems to be his radical idea that he was a deity and pushing everyone to make sacrifices to him that eventually got John the Apostle in trouble. And he was brought to Rome during the reign of Domitian and tortured, and then they exiled him off to Patmos. But he wrote the book of Revelation there. And then finally, we get to just after the time of the apostles. That's a coin of Emperor Hadrian. And he's actually the emperor who tried to erase the historical memory of Christianity. In particular, he built a Roman temple over the tomb of Jesus, but inadvertently in doing so, he helped to preserve the site.
Wow. So these coins from ancient times really tell us more than just a date. I mean, they tell us about a culture. They tell us about the leaders. They tell us about what was going on in that civilization. Here, an American coin, in God we trust, liberty. There's really no difference than the ancient coins we were looking at in the New Testament times.
Yeah.
So in our next session on Bible Unearthed, we are going to take a look at a very exciting topic called undiscovered archaeology. Welcome back to Bible Unearthed. Now, in this segment, we're going to talk about undiscovered archaeology. Tito?
Dave, you've had this long gray hair sticking out. It's been bothering me the entire series.
Oh. Well, you're the archaeologist. Dig up something ancient. Wow, Nebuchadnezzar.
Human, male, 40s. But let's get back to archaeology. So we've talked about a lot of sites and artifacts. So many things have been found. You might think there's nothing left to be discovered. But in fact, there are so many sites and artifacts haven't even been located yet, let alone excavated. We've got a few examples out here that we can take a look at. Here we have Derbe, which is one of the cities in Turkey that Paul visited during his missionary journeys. And excavations there have just recently begun after the location for this city was confirmed.
So we came here for drive-through history, and what's amazing to me is this entire hill is totally, except for the very tip top there, unexcavated. There's a whole city inside that hill that hasn't even been dug up yet.
Right,
So much history hidden inside there.
Here's another one nearby, Lystra, where Paul also visited. And you can see excavations really haven't even begun. They've just done some survey work there, but they have identified the site. Now, a very famous location in the New Testament, Colossae, which is where the letter to the Colossians was written. We know where it is, but excavations have never been done there. It's a whole New Testament city waiting to be dug up.
You can see little rocks and pillars and things kind of peeking up out of the ground there, and they just kind of beg to be dug up, don't they?
This picture shows the use of archaeological technology, LiDAR specifically, and a group of researchers used this over the jungles in Central America, and they found that there are about 60,000 Mayan sites that we didn't know about that have yet to be uncovered.
Wow. So they're just hiding under the canopy of the jungle. Wow.
Yeah, and technology allows us to
Now,
locate those.
Is this the kind of technology we're talking about? You'd also penetrate the sand or maybe the water and see
It's
structures?
similar, but it's not exactly the same equipment.
Okay, but similar kinds of technologies. Awesome.
Jerusalem, which you're all familiar with. Now, Jerusalem, of course, has a lot of excavations going on, but as you can see, it's also covered by modern structures. There's still a modern living city there. And so there is still much to be discovered in ancient Jerusalem that could tell us things about the time of the Old Testament and the New Testament and beyond.
There are discoveries that take place, though, even today, right? I see stories all the time.
Oh,
of
for
something
sure.
that gets found
Ongoing.
under the Temple Mount.
In fact, one of the most controversial recent discoveries in Jerusalem is this James ossuary.
That's one of those bone boxes, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And what makes this controversial is two different things. One, that it was discovered on the antiquities market, not in an actual excavation. And second is the inscription, the people that it mentions on there. Here we have a slide showing us this Aramaic inscription, which reads, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. And so we've got three people in the Gospels and the New Testament mentioned here, but Jesus himself is mentioned on this first century inscription from before 70 AD. Now, the controversy and the accusations were that this was a forgery or partially a forgery, but so many scholars went through and critically analyzed this, and we came to the conclusion that it's authentic.
Wow.
There's still a small group who pushes back against it, but the majority would say this is actually a first century ossuary with that inscription, seems to be referring to James the Apostle and Jesus himself. Just before James was martyred in Jerusalem, Peter and Paul were in Rome. So I'm going to read this passage from Acts chapter 28, verse 16. It says, when we got to Rome, the centurion delivered the prisoners to the captain of the guard, and Paul was allowed to live by himself with a soldier to guard him. So this tells us not only did Paul go to Rome, but he was in the care of the Praetorian Guard. That Praetorian barracks is still there today, and something really interesting about that specific time period is from Roman historical sources, we know there was only one captain of the Praetorian Guard during that time. Normally there was two. So a little historical detail that Luke gets right.
Wow.
In Rome, we have a number of incredible monuments from the New Testament period. Some were there during the time of Paul and Peter, some just after in the time of John. This is from the Arch of Titus.
Whoa.
Congratulations.
That's excellent.
That's a big honor.
Although I'm not actually named after Emperor Titus. You see this relief on the side, though. It's commemorating the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, and it shows the Romans taking back some of the sacred objects from the temple, including the menorah there.
It's almost like a picture caught in time. I mean, it actually shows us the temple instruments right there in that relief.
It does, and because of that, it's incredibly important historically. Here we have the Circus Maximus, which the ancient authors tell us could hold up to 250,000 people, making it the biggest arena in the entire ancient
You
world.
can see the track, right? That's where they used to do chariot races, right?
Exactly.
Now, would they have also persecuted Christians?
Yeah, this seems to have happened a little bit later in the Christian period, probably not right at the time of Paul and Peter, but soon after. This is in part of the Forum. Now, the Roman Forum, we know, is a place where there was this special prison that the Apostle Paul seems to have been placed in just before his execution. He probably didn't get to wander around and sightsee as he was under house arrest.
Sure.
The Colosseum there in the background, which was not in existence at the time of Peter and Paul, but it was by the time the Apostle John got there, and may have even been the place where Domitian took John and put him in that boiling oil before he was exiled to Patmos.
Wow.
And then we have a wider shot of the Roman Forum. Now, there's actually this hallway there where Paul might have been taken to appear before Nero in his initial trial before he was released. And then, of course, he was arrested again, imprisoned, and executed. And here we have the Basilica and Square of St. Peter, where Peter was crucified, probably upside down at the Circus of Nero, as it's called, and then buried there. And that's why the church was erected, to commemorate that.
Incredible. Well, that looks like your show. I mean, there's so much history, so much archaeology in Rome, and Dave's been there a few times with Drive Through History. So we put together a clip, show you more special places, special sites of Rome.
At the beginning of the 1st century, Augustus vastly improved Rome, remarking that he had founded a city of brick and left it a city of marble. In addition to building an imperial palace, Augustus built many temples, including one to his stepdad, Julius Caesar.
Subsequent emperors added to the city, and by the time Paul arrived in 60 AD, Rome included the imperial palace complex, the Roman Forum, the Forum of Caesar, the Forum of Augustus, the Praetorian Barracks, the Circus Maximus, and numerous other temples, theaters, baths, gardens, aqueducts, fountains, bridges, villas, apartments, altars, and arches.
Amazingly, many of these buildings are still standing and in great condition, considering their 2,000-year history. As it turns out, the ancient Romans used a special kind of concrete in their construction, concrete that both hardened underwater and grew stronger with time. It was a concrete called pyroclastic aggregate concrete. And it was an excellent example of the amazing ingenuity of the ancient Roman builders. Thank you. Thank you. And could you please find someplace else and never come back?
Here are some of the highlights of ancient Rome at the time of Paul.
The Pantheon was a major temple dedicated to all of the gods. It was constructed between 29 and 19 BC using some of that famous Roman concrete we just talked about. Now, after the time of Paul, the Pantheon was damaged by a fire until Hadrian reconstructed the temple in the 2nd century. The Pantheon stands today as one of the most iconic buildings of ancient Rome. The Theater of Marcellus was the largest theater in the city, accommodating up to 20,000 spectators. Julius Caesar cleared the space for the theater, but he was murdered before construction began. Augustus completed the theater in about 12 BC. Now, the Theater of Marcellus has been used for various purposes over the centuries, but mostly for plays and concerts. The Roman Forum. This was the center of life in everyday Rome. This area was filled with government buildings, judicial courts, statues, temples, shops, and this open plaza here in the middle. This was the heart of Rome, the site for elections, trials, speeches, and parades, one of the most celebrated commercial centers and meeting places in the ancient world.
We see many important discoveries have been made in Rome and so many other cities. Jerusalem, for example, that James ossuary we just talked about. But there are some artifacts like the James ossuary that weren't discovered in archaeological excavations. They just sort of appeared on the antiquities market. And this antiquities market can be a problem sometimes. There are people out there looting sites and then selling these items on the black market. And then when they come to the attention of scholars and the public, there are always these questions about them. Where did they come from? Are they even real? Are they fakes? Are there forgeries? Those were the accusations leveled against the James ossuary. That's a huge issue because it's such an important artifact with that inscription that it has. So we need people to be doing archaeology and history in the right way with these controlled excavations where we're actually finding things in the history and the context that we know about, that we can document.
Well, we've looked at so many legitimate sites and legitimate artifacts that tie the whole Bible together from the Old Testament to the New Testament. The real people, the places, the events. Again, when I was a kid, I saw the Bible as just this guide for living that kept me in check as a kid, right? I never really connected the dots that the stories were real history. These were real people, places, and events. Even the most important person, Jesus Christ, his life, his ministry, his death, his resurrection. And we've looked at just so many incredible artifacts, incredible locations that for me, this has just been a super exciting series to go through with you, Titus. I really appreciate it.
I'm going to read something that the Apostle Peter wrote to the early church that, of course, also applies to us. In 1 Peter 3:15, he says, "But in your hearts set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect." So Peter is telling us as Christians that we need to have reasons for what we believe, and we need to be able to give answers to people when they ask us questions. And archaeology is one of the major ways that we can show the reason, the evidence for what we believe. All this material that shows the historical reliability of the Bible, and then we can answer those questions to people to demonstrate the truth of the Bible, the truth of the gospel.
You know, Titus, I grew up watching this movie character called Indiana Jones. He's this very adventurous archaeologist that I even made a home movie about him with my high school buddies, spent an entire summer making probably the cheesiest home movie ever made, all about a spoof Indiana Jones. Now I've gotten to be friends with a real archaeologist, and I've never seen you being dragged behind the back of a truck before, although it might have actually happened.
No.
Your life is still kind of an adventure, and it's been great to tag along with you on some of your adventures. You've gotten to tag along with me on some of my adventures. I love the work you've done because it can give us confidence in the truth of our faith. It's based on reliable fact. So when someone challenges us and says the Bible is based on myth, we can have confidence that it's history. But also, all of it added together points beyond itself to the person of Jesus. And that is who our faith is really in. It's not just in the information of archaeology, it's in the person of Jesus. And I'm excited to consider how our viewers can appreciate who he is as a result of this, and perhaps even have their life changed as a result of the work that you've been able to do. So I've enjoyed spending these last 12 sessions with you guys.
Well said, Dave. To the next great adventure.